There we are. All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another Solution Sunday, because the soul is the solution. Oh, how do we turn this off on Facebook? Sorry.
Been doing that.
God, it's a pain. So we are here this morning with my good friend and business colleague, Damian Nordmann. So good morning, Damian. I'm going to let you introduce yourself to my tribe.
Awesome. Hey, Lisa, thanks for inviting me on. My name's Damian Nordmann. I am a business coach, a mindset coach, a mentor to superheroes, and kind of related to some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today. I've studied, practiced, taught universal laws for 27 years now. And I also am I know this is a commonality you and I have, which is I'm a huge fan of understanding the mind-body connection, the energy-body connection, just understanding that we can be whole and healthy, that we are whole, and that we can actually be healthy through really easily by allowing it. So that's going to be fun to talk about. But yeah, I love all these things, and it's going to be great to see what we dive into today. So that's a little bit about me.
Beautiful. So I know you have quite the background in metaphysics. So let's talk. What is metaphysics for anyone that is not familiar with that term? I'm sure most people are, but there may be some people that aren't fully aware.
I would say probably most people are not actually. I mean, I think people you and I probably associate with are more so gonna know it, but in my years of teaching metaphysics, I found that most people would wonder, like, what is it, right? So, I mean, the word itself, meta meaning like beyond, and physics having to do with the physical world, the physical structure that we're all familiar with, our five senses and physical body and the material world and all that sort of thing. So metaphysics is really studying both the physical world as well as the non-physical world. You could call that spirit, you could call that the vortex, you could call that the inner levels of mind, you could call that subconscious mind, you could call that so many different things. The implicate order, if you want to get holographic universe about it. But it's understanding that our thoughts, our emotions, the energies that we're creating, and these different universal laws that exist are interacting with and enmeshed with the physical world and are actually bringing it into being. And so when you understand the universal laws and you understand metaphysics, even on a basic level, then you start to take a lot of the power back for your life. Instead of thinking that things are happening to you, you recognize that things are happening because of you and through you and the interactions you have with other people and your choices. So that's kind of one way to understand what metaphysics is.
Beautiful. I love that description. And it's so appropriate because we as humans have been so conditioned to believe that we're the victims of our circumstances. Oh, that poor person, they're just the victim of circumstances. They're a victim of their genes, they're a victim of their family heritage, they're a victim of their family circumstances, whatever that is. And we always we're always rooting for the underdog and all of that. So to have the awareness that we're actually not victims, we're creators, that flips all of that programming on its head.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I would say even though I've been studying this stuff for, again, since early 1994, so 20, however many, almost 30 years, coming up on 27 years. It's like, I feel like you can always go deeper with it, because I still find myself sometimes having these threads of karma, these threads of growth, where I'll be like, oh, I'm totally falling into like a victim mode or blaming something. And so I feel like just recognizing that, these principles, these concepts we're presenting, it's not something that you just read about in a book one time or hear someone talk about once and like, oh, I got that, cool. No, it's an ongoing process. I mean, I don't think anyone, even the greatest masters throughout history, spiritual masters and all of those beings and people, I feel like had more to grow, right? And they may have had a certain level of mastery that was beyond most people, but there's always more to understand. There's always more to grow. And that's why we're here. So that's just kind of another piece of it I would kind of throw out there, is this sort of the learning and growth reality for all of us.
I love that, because there was a time, you know, when I was really, really struggling and I was super, super depressed. I was just like, if I could just get to this one spot, like if I could just figure this out, then bam, everything will be great. And I will have learned what I need to learn, you know, and I learned that that wasn't really true. Like I learned that there is always more to learn. And then I realized that we are infinite beings in an infinite universe. There is no end to growing and learning and experiencing. So why would it be that way in these physical bodies?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point, and that concept, even I think of infinity for people, is a tough one for most people to wrap their minds around, because we're trained and taught to see things in such finite, very definite, very static sort of ways. And I think even just in looking at, I know one concept that I've found that really helps me is even just recognizing that I've had existences before this lifetime and that I will have existences after this lifetime. And so like we don't have to get it all figured out now, and we don't have to even get it all figured out in one lifetime, because we've already spent lifetimes growing and changing and experiencing and evolving. And so there's going to be more, and not to use that as an excuse either to like put off changing and growing, because I think that's another maybe a way per person could I've seen people abuse it that way too. So you can kind of, I think people can abuse either direction with that, of like seeing things so finite and freaking out about it, or getting all bent out of shape, or mistaking the idea of this continuum for like laziness and just sort of not really fulfill what you came here to do. But yeah, that infinite, that concept of infinity, there's actually a law I teach called the law of infinity. So we could go way off on that if we wanted to.
Absolutely. We can take this conversation in any direction. I mean, it's a great topic, because as with our linear mind, we think there's a beginning and an end to everything. We're born, we live, then we die, beginning, the middle, and the end. And, you read a book, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Everything is linear with our rational mind. So that concept of infinity is beyond the rational mind. So in order to start grasping that, yeah, let's have a chat about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think again, just starting to recognize that, like you were saying earlier, there's no end to learning and growth. There's no end to what we can experience. And so this idea, like what you were describing, I think I've been there a number of times. I think most people have, where, oh, if I can just accomplish this one thing, then everything else will be better. And it's like, well, maybe it might be a little bit better, because achieving a goal is pretty awesome, and or making some shift in yourself can be really great, but you're still going to have the next thing to look at, the next unfoldment, the next aspect of yourself, the next challenge, the next goal, the next relationship, or the next, like, going deeper into relationships or friendships you have, so one teacher I followed for a few years says, you never get it done, and that's, that there's a certain truth to that, in recognizing that there is a continuum. And I think being able to rest one's mind and just rest in that continuity and just sort of allowing that to kind of flow through you, like, okay, there's always going to be more. So how do I want to just experience each moment? Right? Like, do I want to experience each moment with anxiety about the future? Do I want to experience each moment with fear or doubt or worry, like, oh, this isn't going to work, or I got to have this, or like kind of a what's the word? Not just longing, but sort of a longing or a craving or a lusting after, where you're so much wanting something that you're actually pushing it away, right? You're actually denying it because you're getting so worked up about it. And I think a lot of this comes down to like time, right? Like our concept of time, where we think we want something right now, and we sort of start creating our own timelines for it. And again, sometimes that's okay if you can also breathe with divine timing, with the flow of things. If like you set a goal and can be like, okay, yes, I would like to achieve this by this certain time, and you can still be relaxed about it, so that as that time gets closer, you can adjust and you can make assessments and be like, okay, this is great, this is working out pretty much the way I decided to do it. Or if you're like, oh, this is happening even faster than what I thought, or okay, this is definitely something's off here because this isn't happening, this isn't working. And like we started with, what's my part in it? And not from a place of blame and like, oh, I'm so terrible because I thought some bad thoughts, or I got vibrationally out of whack, but just being able to be, I think, still with oneself and be accepting, and loving with oneself and compassionate, and be like, oh, okay, there's some things I don't quite understand about this. What are they? And as those things unfold, then you can make adjustments and start to see that you're going to learn something, you're going to grow, you're going to have some kind of experience with this goal or this thing you want, this desire, and then you can apply that to all your next experiences. And so so much of it, I think infinity has to do with being present. So it's kind of this interesting thing. It's like when you're present, you have infinite access to infinite intelligence, infinite energy, infinite manifestation, and really infinite being, which is what we are, who we are. And so that's just a few other ways to kind of start to understand infinity and the law of infinity.
I love that. And being present, that is where the soul is. The soul isn't in the future or in the past. You can't access that part of yourself from the future or the past. You can only access that part of self, which is infinite, in the moment. So I love that. And I love what you brought up about wanting something so much that you're pushing it away. Because I find that, especially when you're facing some sort of a disease or physical illness, it's really easy to get caught in that trap of looking for it to improve, looking for the change, looking for it to get better, looking for the signs of getting better. And it's like, oh no, I don't think I'm getting better. I don't know. And we get stuck in that loop. So how do we start to get out of that pushing it away and start getting into that space of allowing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had injuries and illnesses throughout my life, right? I've had a lot of different things. I had spinal meningitis when I was almost 12 and nearly died. I had, what do you call it? Tendonitis in my right arm when I was 16, lasted like over a year. It was very debilitating. Could hardly use my right arm except maybe to write. And just all kinds of other things. I had swollen prostate at the age of 18 and epididymitis and all these different things. So I've had lots of different physical disorders come up, and I used to get headaches chronically, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's interesting because with every physical disorder I've had, it's always come down to how much am I willing to relax? How much am I willing to place my attention somewhere that allows me to relax, allows me to focus on something that feels better, right? And that's going to be different for different people based upon what they're experiencing, what stage of life they're in, what their problems are, or the diseases that come up or the disorders. So it's always hard to give like any kind of one super specific tangible solution, but certainly I think you and I might have been talking about this before we went live. I mean, having the belief that we're whole, right? That wholeness is just who we are, that we're just that we're healthy and whole at our true nature, and that disease and disorder and problems in the body are just manifestations of somehow being out of alignment or out of whack with that soul, with that real self. And again, not to blame, because I think people get into this weird place. I say weird because it's like, for me, it seems kind of strange because I've been doing this for so long, but this place of like thinking that they should then blame themselves if they're the cause for their disorder, that then they start to blame themselves, which makes it worse, when really it's just accepting responsibility. And again, it comes back to this really simple place of, can I just kind of be at peace? Can I relax? Can I just feel a little bit better about whatever it is that I'm experiencing? And from that deeper place of relaxation, and again, it can happen usually for most people in stages. I mean, where it's not like, again, you snap your fingers or you just read something or someone tells you and like, oh, it's all done. There's work to be done, but there's also just taking steps, right? Which is really, I think it makes it easy. Kind of gets into the law of relativity, which is, law of relativity has to do with one thing leads to another, one step leads to another. And so if you can just feel a little bit better about your situation today, and that can be anything, it doesn't even have to be a physical disorder, but certainly with physical disorders, if you can just feel a little bit better today about that and just in general, then you're actually allowing the healing to take place. And then you feel a little bit better the next day. And then the next day, maybe you feel kind of crappy. And so, okay, that's fine. Just accepting that, like, all right, I felt kind of crappy today. Maybe I got upset with myself. And then the more you can just let that go and continue to be present, continue to kind of gently take steps forward, it really kind of becomes this process of unfoldment, is probably one of the best words I know, where, much like a flower blooming, it doesn't happen all at once. It's happening, right? And so those are a few things that I would, just to kind of go off what you were saying.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that you brought up about alignment, because everything is about alignment. Everything that's in your life, my life, is what we are aligned with right now. And when our health, when we get out of alignment with ourselves, when the mind and the soul are not in alignment, when the mind is thinking a bunch of thoughts that are not true at the soul level, this is where the root of all dis-ease emanates. So it's the process of allowing ourselves to come back into alignment. And what I have found is that physical alignment happens so much easier when we have some basic awareness of universal laws and our biology. We have never been taught the 5 biological laws of universal healing, of how our bodies actually function. The medical community is based on germ theory. And it's
Right.
called theory for a reason, because it's never been proven. It's not true. So we have so much misinformation about our bodies. And our bodies are designed to heal themselves automatically. And what I've discovered is, in my own process, is that as humans, we've got the idea of healing all wrong. We've got it backwards. We think that healing means that, oh, we're just gonna just feel better every day, and that everything's gonna. No, healing is actually the body's process of rebuilding itself. And if you've ever done any rebuilding of anything, renovating a kitchen, a house, that process is messy and dirty, and it's noisy and can be painful. This is what happens when the body goes into healing. We actually feel worse. It's called a healing crisis, because the body has to break down or rebuild. And that's the part that's uncomfortable. That's when the symptoms arise. So automatically, when the uncomfortable symptoms arise, we simply go, ruh-roh, something's wrong with me. And what's actually wrong with us is the body is healing. The body is trying to come back into balance. So there are so many things that we have not been told properly about our bodies that send us into fear. And we're not designed to fear our own bodies, but we've been conditioned to fear our own bodies. So it's so, in this day and age when, there's so much external pressure to do things to our bodies out of reaction. It's like, it's so important to understand how our bodies are actually designed to function and what sickness actually is, because we're simply not taught the universal laws of healing and health.
Yeah. What's your understanding of those? Because I don't know if I've ever heard that described, like the universal laws of healing and health. What can you give a snapshot of those? Because now you got me really curious. What you understand about that?
So, in a nutshell, it has been proven beyond the shadow of a doubt, 100% consistent across the board. And this is what a universal law is: 100% consistent. It never wavers. There is never any doubt about it. The law of attraction works 100% of the time, all day, every day, never changes, right? Not random at all. So our bodies, it's the same thing with our bodies. Everything that happens to our bodies happens because of a misalignment. So what that looks like is we have some unexpected shock. Life hits us upside the head and we're like, whoa, what just happened? You get the pink slip at work, you get the text from your spouse that they've left you, like whatever it is, like, whoa. And we weren't prepared to handle whatever that shock was. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It can just be something that we don't know what to do with. And then it starts the process of, oh my gosh, what do I do? How do I handle this? And we're in a period of crisis. We're like, what do I do? And as soon as that happens, the body goes into fight, flight, or freeze. So there is one of three reactions that the body goes through, depending on how we process the shock. Is it a self-devaluation, like, oh my gosh, I screwed up, I should have done better? Is it a worry in the nest? Like, if you think of a bird in the nest, like the ones that the bird would nurture, like, is it a worry in that immediate home environment? Is it a A territorial anger conflict. Is somebody stepping on our toes? Is somebody trying to take over our spot at work? Is, depending on what type of conflict it is, will depend on how the body responds. So we can look at what's going on in the body, and we can say, oh, you've had this type of conflict. And we can say, what's been going on in your life? And we will find out that every person that has the same conflict, the same physical symptoms, has had the same conflict. And the universal law says, as soon as you resolve your conflict, emotionally, you come to a resolution, that your body then returns to balance. Your body heals itself. So when we're going through these emotional conflicts, the body does one of three things. We have the fight, flight, or freeze scenarios. The body is either building up extra cells, because the body will need them. If we have a death fright, for instance, if you go back to like the caveman, caveman sees the saber-toothed tiger, ruh-roh, I could die. I'm going to need to either run faster or fight harder. So the body starts building up extra cells in the lungs so that we have more oxygen availability so we can run faster, fight harder. So it's an adaptive process. So those extra cells are for a reason. And then when we're done with the conflict, the body doesn't need those cells. So now it sends in the little neurosurgeons, the bacteria and viruses, if they actually exist. And those are the things that break down those cells. And then when that's happening, we have coughing, we have fever, we have congestion. But that's because the body no longer needs those cells, and that's how it expels those cells. So when we look at things in the body, we have to realize that there was an original conflict that happened that triggered the body to either make extra cells, or it might deplete cells. Like if there's what we call a stink conflict, if it's hard to breathe for some reason, if we can't, if they put manure on all the fields, and it's like, oh my gosh, like this, it could be a literal stink conflict, or it could be this situation really stinks conflict. So if something stinks and we don't want to breathe, the body widens the nasal and bronchial passages so that every time we do breathe, we're inhaling more oxygen. So we can get more oxygen with less breaths. So then when that stink conflict is over, now the body has to go in and rebuild those cells. So again, we have phlegm, we have coughing, we have, whatever, these symptoms, do they sound familiar to people? These symptoms are there not because we're sick, they're there because we're actually healing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's there's so much to that. By the way, is some of what you're talking about in German New Medicine? Because I feel like I feel like some of that was Deanna, who's a friend of ours.
Yep.
When I talked to her, she explained some of that, which was kind of cool. It's interesting because at the School of Metaphysics, we would do these health readings for people, and I still have friends who've been trained how to do these Akashic readings or intuitive health readings, and they're really fascinating. And it's interesting because a lot of times we would see similar, like when a person had a certain physical disorder, we would see certain mental and emotional constructs that were similar. Now, I mean, of course, you got specifics to each person of what's going on, but just as an example, since like you're bringing up stuff, let's just say like with the lungs, like one of the things that we found was that when a person had any kind of a lung problem, let's say chronic cough, let's say getting sick where like, and I can attest to this for myself because when I used to get colds, it would tend to go like from my throat to for like a day to my sinuses having some problems, and then it would land in my lungs, right? And it would just like hang out in my lungs for an undetermined amount of time, sometimes a long time.
Exactly.
Um, and a lot of what we found was that the lungs would have to do with unfulfilled desires, right? Like times when we were and blaming other people for not having those fulfilled desires. And so we would kind of even sometimes look at systems of the body, kind of like what you were describing. I feel like where you look at what a system or an organ of the body does, and you can see how there's some correlation to a thought construct or an emotional construct that we hold on to that's out of alignment, that then weakens that system of the body. Like if you're there too long, right? Like if you're in this, like you could say, lower vibrational place, just meaning that it's a out of sync, out of harmony vibration for too long in a specific sort of way, then that part, organ, or system of the body gets weakened until either an infection sets in, or it literally like starts to break down, or you have an injury. um, so that's certainly, I love learning all these different ways of interpreting like the energies, the thought processes, and how it's manifesting or bringing forth what's happening in the body. And I think as long as a person is open to these different ideas and concepts, they're going to find something that makes sense to them. They're going to find something that works. And it's so much better than just this idea that there's some evil virus out to get you. And it's, it's like this, like almost like it's almost like it's personified, right? Like with like COVID, right? Like there's this COVID-19 that's out there, and wherever it was born and created, and now it's trying to get to us. And so we have to like protect ourselves with all these things. I was just having a conversation with a buddy of mine who gave me a Thai massage a few days ago. And I mean, I'll wear a mask out of respect for people, because I just honor people's sensitivities and whatnot. But I've never felt once during the whole pandemic that I needed to wear a mask, because I know that I'm in alignment with who I am enough that that I like you said, if the virus exists, which is kind of like, what is it really? Is it energy? Is it a physical thing? What is it? I knew that I wasn't going to be able to attract it or even allow it to get through my aura. And if I felt like I was, because I mean, there's been times when I've been lower in my life or more stressed or something, where might feel susceptible, then sure, I could always put on a mask or stay away from people. But I think that self-awareness is so important, that people gaining that authority for their own body, their own mind, their own emotions, enough education and information and experience that then culminates in authority, right? Where you can be like, yeah, and honesty too. I mean, you got to have a certain level of self-honesty to say, yes, okay, I know these things about myself right now. I know this is my level of health. I know how I've either created or allowed this level of health. And or if you are maybe susceptible, being a kind of awake to what's going on with that. But anyway, I'm kind of dovetailing on all sorts of directions, but I'm curious any of your thoughts on
Well, I like how you talk about that it gets personified, because that was the key to me releasing myself from this whole cancer thing, was because it felt like I was being attacked by this thing. And it was like this personified thing that was attacking me. And it was terrifying. And once I finally got the download and suddenly had clarity about, wait a minute, there is no third party. There is no something attacking me. There's me and my body. That's it. And my body is out of alignment because I've been out of alignment. There is no third party. And that in that moment, the whole idea of cancer simply vanished. And I realized that it was not true at all for me or for anybody else. It's not what's happening to our bodies, but it gets personified as the enemy. And just like the current enemy out there. And every if we look at how this this holographic reality this is set up, is that we are set up in battle mode, whether we're battling other countries, whether we're
Mm-hmm.
battling to the top of the heap, whether we're battling a disease, whether we're battling, you know, a mental illness. We're always taught we have to battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even sports, you know,
Yeah.
battling. We are in battle mode 24/7 from the time we emerge.
Yeah.
And it's like survival of the fittest. And if you look at it in a pyramid, you know, the fittest seem to be the ones at the top of the pyramid who have battled their way up there, and they now have all the control because they have all the money. So now they make all the rules. And basically it's a top-down society, and we have just been indoctrinated by all of the rules that have been set up. And
Yeah.
the ones who are in charge, they don't really want us to know the universal laws. They don't want us empowered. They don't want us to understand how to manage our own bodies. And we have been taught since birth that doctors are the only ones who
Right.
know about bodies. It's like, I'm the only one that knows about this body. I'm the only one that has lived in here. Like,
Right.
nobody else knows this body better than I do. But we're talked right out of our own sovereignty, because we're taught right from the beginning, oh, well, you better go and we got to go
Right.
check. You got to go check. You got to go get your annual checkup to find out if you're okay. You know,
Yeah.
or find out if there's something coming, something lurking. It's
Yeah.
like, no, I actually know that I am totally 100% fine. I don't need to have my breasts radiated. I don't need anything shoved anywhere. Like,
Nothing cut out or cut off.
I know from the inside out what's going on here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There's so many things I feel like you just touched on that we could go down. I mean, that sovereignty that we need to have, what I sometimes I call it sovereignty, or I call it authority, like our own authority, and giving your authority and power over to someone else. It's like, to me, is just madness. And the fact that we do it so quickly, and it's gosh, I don't know who was talking about this recently, but you know, especially with women and their bodies and doctors with giving birth, you know, from like, so it's like almost like from like, well, I'm going to switch topics, but that it's like there's so much of that that's prevalent. But what I wanted to actually get to is what you were talking about with the fighting and the separation, because yeah, it's so interesting that, and I think that there has been a place for war in our evolution, right? Like I think there were I don't think anything exists in the world that hasn't had a purpose, but I think what we're seeing now is increasingly the evolution of humanity reaching stages where we're like, why are we still fighting everything, right? Like, you know, the only I mean, some of the wars that we perpetuated in the last century have been just kept going because of economic reasons, right? Because there's companies that make weapons, and there's, you know, all this thing. And similar with modern medicine, right? And there's like correlations. It's like so much of modern medicine still exists because, again, there's a bunch of people who want to keep making money. And I don't have a problem with making money. The only thing I have a problem with is greed and fear. When greed and fear come together, I mean, neither one of them is great, anyway, but you bring them together, and that's where the problems happen. Is pharmaceutical companies wanting to continue this line of how medical doctors think and act and function, which, like you said, programs everybody else to be fighting themselves and to be at war with themselves and all this sort of thing. Or whether you're talking about the companies that make weapons, right? And like how much that's enmeshed in politics, right? And like you said, all this other kind of idea, even in business, right? Like the person who's can kind of beat out the competition, wins. Where really, I mean, the reality of it, and I think this is where people like me and you and friends we have and all the different other people who are listening who understand this concept of co-creation, right, of cooperation, that we actually can have way more abundance and more of everything, more wholeness, more joy, more love, more health, when we're co-creating, when we're cooperating, when we're sharing and we're integrating. And I can even say that I've kind of become aware in my life recently, like more acutely aware of the ways that I separate, right? There's ways that I fight or separate. And it's interesting because there's been like this movement in my life of like friendship and partnerships and relationships and creation, but also separating myself from people and groups, and coming to understand more and more, like, when's the value of separation and when is separation destructive, right? Because separation can be useful, and at times it's been useful for me to separate out from influences that like was not healthy or helpful. It's like I need to separate. Or if I need to kind of come within myself and have time to separate and be, okay, where am I stand with this? Where am I in my life, right? So separation doesn't have to be war. It can be healthy, and it can be linked with connection and cooperation and collaboration. And there can be sort of this cool dance that happens. But I think so often that's not what happens. We end up in our modern world separating and fighting, or like what you were talking about, that fight, flight, or freeze, which are all kind of ways of separating, right? I mean, it's like you're either, yeah. Anyway, so those are a few more a few more of my rants to go along for the ride.
Yeah, I think that we have all become separated from our own bodies. We have become separate. The body, the mind, and the soul have separated into three parts. And we've all been taught through religion that the soul lives off in heaven, and that if we're lucky we'll reunite with it at some point, or and then the body, we got no clue about the body. Only doctors know about the body. So we've got a body, a mind, and a soul, three pieces. We have separated into three parts of one. And now I think what is happening throughout humanity is we are starting to bring those things back into alignment so that we become whole and complete again. And what we start to see is that we are not the mind. We've been operating from the mind this whole time, but we are actually the soul. And when we quiet the mind, we can start to access universal wisdom, because the soul is connected to the universe and it has all the answers. The soul is the solution.
Nice.
I like to say that the mind thinks, but the soul knows.
Yeah.
So when we get quiet and we start to tap into that soul level awareness, that's the metaphysical part, is the non-physical part of who we are, is who we are. It is pure light, pure consciousness, pure energy, and and it's in the physical body.
Yeah. Well, and that's I love that, and that's such an interesting thing because, and with what you just actually, the last part of what you just said was what I was going to comment on, which is that the body has so much intelligence to it, right? Because the body's a manifestation of the soul or the divine, God. I mean, I feel like in a lot of ways, the body is a manifestation of God consciousness, right? I mean, if you want to call it that, a lot of different things we could call it. And I feel like it ends up saying the same thing in different ways, so people can understand it in different ways. But yeah, I mean, that's something that took me quite a while to even really begin to grasp, was just that intelligence that's in the body. And I think that comes around again to what we've been talking about today, about being one's own authority, or listening to your own body so you can know what's really going on. And I think that links up with the soul and those inner parts of our self, to just recognize that, yeah, the conscious mind and the brain are going to go down the different habit patterns that it has if you're not careful. And so to quiet that, whether that's in meditation or a focused practice, or I mean, there's a lot of ways to do that, to then allow that wisdom and that knowledge to come forth, that's truth, right? That's the more of a direct grasp of truth, so that we can actually know what choices are going to be healthy and are going to be fulfilling. And it's a process. I mean, again, I'm not saying that anybody gets it like you just like, oh yeah, and I just got it from now on, like but definitely there's steps that I think a person can take to be able to do that. And again, whether that's meditation or some other practice to relax and still the mind and the body. And I think for me, it's been evolving, right? I mean, there's a lot of stuff I learned at the School of Metaphysics, because we covered a lot of ground and we were always adding new things in. And then since I left that organization, I've learned practices and wisdom from people that have continued to help me gain mastery and to understand what you were just describing. Just that listening to the soul, that listening to the body, and kind of putting the mind in its proper place, so to speak.
Yeah, what I've discovered is that when we give the mind real knowledge, of the universal laws and how things actually function, not the way the mind has been programmed to believe things function, but when we show the mind really what actually happens, the mind can then start to relax. And when we show the mind that the body's got it going on, the body knows exactly what to do to bring itself back into balance. The only thing the body needs to go back into balance is it needs us to bring ourselves back into alignment. That's it. We have to provide the proper environment for the healing to happen.
Yeah.
If you break your arm and you've got two pieces going on, you got to realign them and then stabilize them.
Right.
And then the body does the rest.
Right.
All we have to do is provide the proper environment. The body does the rest.
That's so good.
So all we need to do is bring ourselves back into alignment, which then is the proper environment, and the body can do the rest. And when we understand that pain equals healing, we stop being afraid of the pain.
Right. Oh my gosh, so good. Yeah, and like what you're saying about the proper environment, that's that we really didn't talk too much about that, but that is huge, right? So like whether you're putting yourself around the right people, that's huge. Or if you need time by yourself, sometimes that's the environment you need for healing. Sometimes you need a mix of both, like the right kinds of time by yourself, the right kind of people. Sometimes you got to be in nature. And that's something that, I've kind of missed because I haven't really got to get out in nature a lot in the last few years. But it's like kind of on my kind of what I'm planning to take some mini trips to do that, because there's so much, it's just like, there's so much that can happen when we allow it to in nature, because nature is in and of itself doing everything you just described, right? It's like it's allowing everything to unfold perfectly, whereas we try, we think because we can create cars and buildings and planes and all these really cool things that we can create, that we have to aggressively create the wholeness and the healing, when, like what you're saying, the body will heal itself when allowed to. And so I think that understanding that the environments, like you may have to do something radical, like to shift your environment. If your environment is toxic, destructive, or really preventing you from the healing right now, and I know that's been the case for me, and in some ways it's part of why I moved away from my family when I was 20, right? Like I felt like I needed certain healing, and I didn't necessarily have those words at the time. It's like I was going to just kind of do stuff with the School of Metaphysics and be a part of that organization in other parts of the world. But really what it boiled down to was healing. I needed to be in different environments with different people and be away from my birth environments and birth nuclear family and even some of the extended family, where there was some toxicity and some elements that were like, oh my gosh, like here I am when I'm 18 getting these like epididymitis and swollen prostate. It's like that was a big wake up call. Like this is something you should get when you're like, in my mind at that time, it's like this is something you should get when you're 70 or 80, right? Swollen prostate, right? I mean, now I think you should never get it, but you should just be healthy. But back then, it's like this is really weird. This is not an 18-year-old disorder, and so that was a huge red flag for me to be like something's not right. So, by the time I was 20, I was just like, okay, I'm okay moving away and giving myself these other environments. And some of the environments were better than others, but at least it was different than the environments I grew up in and the people I was around. And so I knew I was getting something different. And as time went on, it did create more and more healing and wholeness, because I got to be around a variety of people, which was nourishing. And like you said, feeding myself that knowledge that's about myself and growth and healing in the soul, so much universal knowledge and wisdom that was just like constantly in my face or constantly in my awareness, or I was even teaching it. And so, oh my gosh, yeah, talk about, I love that. Great point about, I mean, I feel like that point you made about the environment, that's huge. A person could do so much with that right there.
Absolutely. It's actually a big part of, it's like this part of the course that I'm starting to offer coming up, called Aligning with Your Radiantly Healthy Self. It's about how to bring yourself back into alignment, and part of it is how to create the environment for success so that you can succeed before you even start. Like, because it's possible to create your outcome first and then create the environment that will allow the outcome to come to you. So when we're going to heal, we can set that intention, and then we can create the proper environment, and then we can simply allow the body to do what it normally does. And it's a far more effective way than the current model of, here, take this and hope that it works.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's wacky. It's totally wacky. Totally agree. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today about a lot of things, and particularly with this. I mean, I kind of hope anybody who watches this comes away with a new view of their own health, their own wholeness, different view on disease and disorder, and that they continue that journey, because I feel like if you can keep, I know one of the things that helped me when shortly after that I started at the School of Metaphysics, my teacher and another teacher at the school, we were on a trip in a car. We were listening to a Deepak Chopra lecture called The New Physics of Healing, where he just goes, it's like a 75-minute talk where he goes into all these different things, research about health, healing, aging. And it was so good that it was just like, I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense of all these different concepts, and some of the stuff we were talking about, and then some of it just put in different words. But even just taking aging and even taking the conditioning that people and animals fall into, right? And how that conditioning gets replayed over and over again. So yeah, I feel like if nothing else, I hope people really take away that some basic grasp of health and healing and wholeness that they can then do something with in their life, change the way they're living so that they can be healthier and be happier.
Absolutely. Aging, I think we have aging all wrong. If you're driving a car and the wheels are out of alignment and you never bring those wheels back into alignment, that car is going to fall apart eventually. Like, there is no other way. If you're driving down the street all shaky in the car, it's putting stress on the car. And this is what happens with our bodies. When we're out of alignment, we're driving on shaky ground, and our bodies feel that stress and that resistance. And our bodies are designed to last for far longer than we've been allowed to know. We just simply assume that 70, 80, 90 years old, that's it, tops. And we use that linear mind. We go, oh my God, I just turned 30. Oh no, now I just turned 40. 50 now. It's over the hill. It really doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Well, there's been evidence of like yogis in India who lived for hundreds of years. There's people in the Bible who evidently lived hundreds of years. There's even a guy in China, probably several, but I know there's like a documented case of some guy who was a herbalist and martial artist, lived to be 230 something years old, sired like hundreds of kids. I mean, he just like, and this wasn't that long ago. I mean, he was alive just a couple hundred years ago, or maybe even into like the 1900s. I think he might have died or something. And so I agree. And I also believe, just I think one more thing about aging is that I like what Abraham talks about with aging. They say, you should really go happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, happy, healthy, dead. and so much, a lot of people are proving that more and more, that we can be totally healthy and totally enjoy life. And then when you're ready to just transition into the next, level of consciousness and release the body, you can just, it's not a big deal. It's not like this terrible, grueling thing. It's also not like this necessarily has to be this shocking thing, like, but it's just, I'm ready to do something else.
Gonna step out of the body now. I'm done. Yeah, absolutely. And if even one person has lived to 235 or 250 or 600, whatever, if one person has done that, it means that we all can do that.
Right. Totally. Yeah. Aging and immortality. That's a whole other, I feel like we could have a whole other conversation about that.
Yes, we'll have to have you back.
Yeah. This is good. This has been fun.
This has been great, Damian. Thank you so much. I hope that people have gotten lots of good tidbits out of it. I don't see any comments today, but hopefully people will be watching the replay. If you're watching the replay, drop some comments and let us know that you're watching. If you have questions, drop them in. We'll be happy to pop in and answer them. So thank you so much, Damian. This has been great. It's always fun. I love these Soulution Sundays and talking about the soul, and what we focus on is what we create. So let's focus on the heaven on earth, the state of being in alignment. that allows us to live that happy, healthy, fun existence.
Awesome. Awesome.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. All right. So everyone, thank you for joining us. And until next week, create for yourselves a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.